Hi first years, hope you had a nice May half term. This week we are back to education and we're going to be looking at feminism and education. Let's get going with a bit of a plan. Mel and myself have made a plan up until the summer. Now, as it stands, I mean, this is at the moment. If we end up coming back in a couple of weeks, it may we may have to tweak it a little bit, depending on what happens. But this is our best guess for how things will look between now and the summer. There's actually only 5.5 weeks left until the summer holidays. Now, this week beginning the 1st of June, we are looking at feminism and education, which is this little video, and they are shorter because I'm doing two theories in 1 week. So today is feminism and education. I think you'll find this one quite straightforward. The second, which will be a separate video, is postmodernism and education. Basically, this week, feminism and education will be assessed with a 15-mark little essay. Postmodernism and education is a bit more information based, and there's a documentary to watch. Okay. Now, next week will be all revision. So there'll be no videos. We can still interact on and talk on Hangouts and all that type of stuff, but the basic of it is we're trying to replicate what would happen had we been at college. So we'll be having a revision week and we'll be revising the family unit. We will upload revision tasks and there are loads. So there'll be bits and pieces you can work through. Remember, family is a 15 and a 35. And the week beginning the 15th of June, and I mean, this is pretty solid, regardless, this is what we'll be doing, is assessment week. Now, our assessment week is later than most subjects. Usually what happens is the week after half term's an assessment week, and this is used to inform what happens next, how well you do, whether you've made the right decisions for your A-levels, and for us to really assess kind of like our first years going into second year. Obviously, things are different this year, and so while we continue to do the assessment week, we'll be assessing kind of like progress with a whole range of different ways. So the 8th of June will be revision, fairly independent. The week of the 15th of June, you will do a family exam paper, which Mel and myself will mark to exam standard. Now, these last 2 weeks before we break up, we have earmarked for an introduction to crime. As I keep saying, should be back by then. Fingers crossed, but who knows? We may tweak it back to education, but we'll see. For now, this week's education, then we're going to get this big assessment, the year one assessment, the mock week out the way, and then we'll most likely continue with crime. Next year, we'll finish education in year two. We'll then cover the last two units, which is crime and inequality. So well done for working so hard at home. Yes, I won't lie, usually education's finished by the summer. In this instance, it won't be. We'll be halfway through. That's absolutely fine. Okay, there's plenty of weeks left for that, and we're not worried about it. But we're really pleased with how hard you're working at home. Now, this is, if you remember rightly, what we need to learn for education. And I mean, the first bullet point, the role and function of education in contemporary society, that was the very first week, all the different photos, and we've done it. The other hard one, I guess, is the theoretical perspectives, and that's where we're starting to look at feminism, Marxism, postmodernism, the new right. That's mostly done. As I keep saying, we're doing feminism and postmodernism today, which actually only leaves the new right, which we'll look at in policy, and interactionalist, which we will look at in subcultures and labelling. Okay, so we're making pretty good progress, really. So today's lesson is feminism and education, and it's in just the one lesson. This is your one video voiceover, which is just about family. You've got a shorter video, shorter slides, and a shorter booklet. And I'll make another one in a minute for the postmodernism. So today is, for a starter, I've got an old-fashioned school clip, which really sets the scene for why feminists have been concerned about education. We get the prep work feedback. Before half term, you were asked to do a bit of reading about different feminist theorists around education, and we'll be looking at those questions shortly. We're going to look at Marxist, liberal, and radical feminist views of education. Now, I know I say this all the time. I think we should look at black and difference feminism, but Educast, the exam board we're doing, don't. So, while in class, I'll talk to you about it and give you a full and more thorough education for what you need to know for the exam. It's these three: Marxist, liberal, radical. We're also going to look at the hidden curriculum, which we've made reference to before. The hidden curriculum are the things we pick up, but they're not explicitly taught. Marxists say the hidden curriculum's about hierarchy and acceptance of capitalist values. Durkheim would say the hidden curriculum is about picking up a value consensus and the prevention of anomie. The article and questions we'll have a look at, which is your prep work, and we will do a 15 marker. That's the one written piece of work you'll be submitting this week. So first off then, I'd like you to pause the video and have a little look at this clip. It's a school in Kent in 1959. I've got 4 questions here. It's mainly about subject choice and gender role socialisation. Now, when you go onto the clip, so when you go onto the link, it's this. And it looks a bit weird because you can't really see where the video is. So just scroll down and it's here. Okay, so this clip here gives us an excerpt of the Mallory School in Kent. It's one of the first new comprehensive schools around the time, and it really shows you the difference in gender education girls received. You can see here it was very much focused on this very traditional cooking, cleaning. It was preparation for being a housewife, essentially. I mean, if you were bright, they might have let you perhaps do some secretarial skills so you could work for a man, but it was very, very, very old-fashioned and gendered. And this is really where the concern about feminist views in education came from. This idea that the purpose of education is to reinforce a gender divide. And I know we've discussed this lots, the idea that we are more likely to see women at college, in cleaning roles, in tabbars, in cooking your hash browns and serving your Costa and all that type of stuff. We're far more likely to see a disproportionate amount of women in lower pay and lower status, cleaning, cooking, caring, whether that's support work, teaching assistants, learning support assistants. There's almost like a hierarchy, but we're more likely to see an overrepresentation of men in leadership roles. So while we do see far more women in education, we see an overrepresentation of women at the lower end of the pay scale. Does this make sense? Yeah. So the idea being for feminism and education is that we're kind of like subconsciously picking up on that. So that if you had I don't know, a science teacher at school and that it was a male and his female partner was having a baby, probably wouldn't have noticed. You might be off for a couple of days, and you would learn that you'd pick up that when men have children, start a family, nothing much changes. Yet if your science teacher was a female and she was pregnant, you'd kind of assume she'd be on maternity leave. She will be away. She will go part time. Her views will be different. And we kind of slowly pick up that female teachers, when they have babies, they change. Male teachers, when they have start a family, doesn't change. And it's almost like we're subconsciously building up this reservoir of our traditional gender divide. So it might be like taught really clearly, like in this school, or it might be that we just pick up and kind of like role models, or even the books we read. Do you remember, like, I'll come on to this in a minute, like the Biff, Chip and Kipper and stuff, you know, they always find a key, those ones. Always like the dad gets in from work, mum's always cooking dinner, and it's just a bit boring. And I suppose we kind of expect it in 1959, but do we expect it now? So, first things first, and I'm going to use a little booklet. So when you're watching this, bring your booklet up, please. And then you can look here, what can you remember? So you can make a little note as we're talking now. What I'd ask you to do then, please, is to pause this slide and to complete what you can remember about Marxist, liberal and radical. I've said describe it in 10 words-ish, okay? So if you can pause that now, please. Okay. Once you've done that, let's have a look at some ideas. I haven't counted to 10 in fairness, I've just put the basic summary. So Marxist feminists. For Marxist feminists, women's exploitation is a mix of capitalism and patriarchy. That ties into, well, both of these really, but the reserve army of labour, the idea that women are low pay, low status. Marxist feminism says that women are the slaves of the wage slaves. That's Margaret Benson. Financially, women are takers of shit. Now, I know you all like to quote that because you can swear in an essay, but you have to understand what it means. It means that women are subordinated both by capitalism, where they are paid less, where they have lower status, lower quality positions, and patriarchy, where they fulfil the double burden or triple shift within the home, where they experience more sexual and domestic violence within the family, um, and within society in general. So for Marxism, women experience this double whammy of exploitation and unfairness through money and sexism and male dominance. Okay, so we're guessing, I suspect, that Marxist feminists are going to be really concerned about the type of roles that women get channeled into. Liberal feminists. Liberal feminists are the most positive, and they're very focused on legal reform, making society more equal. So, for example, society is much more equal now than it ever has been, and they describe this as a march of progress. And the things which are left is being unequal, the pay gap. I mean, studies vary, don't they? But we often kind of hover around the 10% pay difference. Um, Inequality in crimes, rape, domestic violence, and so and that does not mean that it doesn't happen to male victims or survivors. Like, obviously, it doesn't. But liberal feminists would say that, oh, and there still is a gender imbalance statistically, but it's getting better all the time. And liberal feminists argue that women and men are developing less clear roles. So we have stay-at-home dads, we have out-to-work women, and in some sense, even I suppose the increasing balancing out of domestic violence against both women and men is indicative of the fact that we've lost these really traditional hegemonic roles. So, in a nutshell, liberal feminists really positive. Nuclear families can be great. Not all men are violent. Not all women want to be a mum. Everything's up for grabs. But they really focus on the law. Okay. Radical feminists. I mean, the clue is in the name. These are the most extreme, the most radical, the most left wing, and the most conflictual. Radical feminism really focuses on crimes of patriarchy. And when we talk about things like rape, sexual violence, domestic violence, they refer to them as a special type of crime, a crime of patriarchy, a crime that reinforces male dominance. They're most critical of the nuclear family. They will say, quite simply, if women want to be in an equal, fair, egalitarian relationship, it cannot be with another man. Cannot be with a man, sorry, because women and men are socialised so differently that men can't help but to try and oppress. And so some radical feminists advocate a type of lesbianism called political lesbianism, as we know, which doesn't necessarily mean that you can't naturally fancy women. It's almost like you're boycotting men. So can you see it's like political? It's not just a woman fancying a woman. That's not like remotely interesting, in fairness, is it? It's a woman who may have previously felt attracted to a man and is saying, no, that's the wrong relationship. That is more likely to lead in domestic violence. I'm more likely to be a victim of domestic and sexual assault. Therefore, I'm boycotting men and I will live with a woman, whether it's in kind of like an intimate relationship or not. It's very much about boycotting men. And they really focus on male violence against women. And I mean, you might say, yeah, but what about female violence against men? What about female violence against females? But radicals are very clear. Men oppress women, men are violent, women are better off without. So to conclude, Marxism, capitalism and patriarchy, liberal, positive, let's change the law, do a petition against pay inequality and society gets fairer, radical, not quite so clear cut, a petition's not going to change the sexual violence statistics. I mean, burglary is illegal, isn't it? But it still happens. And it's more about the essence, I suppose, of women and men. So, what do you think each branch of feminism would view the education system? What's the issue? How do you think they'd view it? So, pause this, go to your booklet, and with the booklet, you can either take a copy of it so that you can type in it, you can print it off, you can just type down the key answers on another bit of paper. I really, really don't mind. Basically, we're going to have to get our folders together, and even if it's when we're back at college, and print everything off so that you've got your folder as usual. Okay, so however you're making notes, please pause this and make your notes, your prediction. Okay, so hopefully you've had your crystal ball out, guessing, predicting what you think each of these different strands would say about education, and I expect you right. So again, I've kind of like made some notes, and it is exactly as we'd expect. So Marxist would argue that the issue they have with education is that it pushes girls into subordinate employment roles. So girls are far more likely to be encouraged, pushed, channeled into being the nurse, not the doctor, being the beauty therapist, not the engineer. They're very concerned about hierarchy and gender, as I was explaining earlier about women being overrepresented in poorly paid roles. And they say this is about money, just as much as it's about kind of like casual everyday sexism. It's about who brings the most money home. And of course, if you're in a straight relationship and babies born, twins are born, and the childcare costs are preventative, because I mean nursery and stuff is really expensive, and you've got to decide who goes part time. If women have been channeled into lower pay and lower status education and links to employment, it tends to be women who go part time, and therein lies the problem. The education system perpetuates patriarchy, as I've got here. It perpetuates this divide by gender and divide by the employment that girls are channeled into. So or boys are more likely to grow into men who are engineers. Girls are more likely to grow into women who do childcare and hairdressing. Absolutely nothing wrong with any of those professions, but the professions that girls are channeled into do pay an awful lot less, and that's the issue. So Marxists are concerned that girls are going to be pushed into low pay. Liberal feminists, I suggest their issues about role models for gender roles and hierarchy, and they're saying it is becoming more equal. And isn't it great when little girls can look up to having a female head, a female principal, really strong female role models? Isn't it great? Things are getting better all the time. And they really focus on positive progress for girls' achievement. I might even say things like, well, actually, girls are doing much better than boys at school. Perhaps we need to help boys. Perhaps boys now feel disempowered and not clear of a gender role. So perhaps liberal feminists about saying, well, girls are doing fantastically. Come on, boys, let's give you a helping hand too. Now, radical feminists are going to be much more focused on the low status of girls and women in school, both in hierarchy and their academic ability. Radical feminist research really tend to focus on sexual violence and harassments of girls and women at school. So the way in which girls might almost like socially be encouraged to, I don't know, not take part in PE after a certain age because girls don't look sweaty, girls don't do this, that, and the other. And girls who do PE may be labelled as being gay or being butch or, being whatever. But basically, like the hidden rules of a school is that boys still call the shots, that boys can still grade girls by their attractiveness, that pretty girls have an easier time. And I suppose girls that fulfil a certain view, and also that female teachers get treated differently as well. That male teachers can almost have a sense of authority that women don't have, and it's because of the views we have about genders. That a woman who is stern is seen as bossy and bitchy, but a man who's being stern is being seen really positive and masculine. So I suppose for radical feminists, it perpetuates patriarchy too. So Marxist is about the career, liberal things are getting better, radical more concerned about the, I suppose, sexual subordination of girls and women. So these couple of slides we're going to go through are quite straightforward, and I don't think anything's going to get more complex than the stuff I've discussed, in fairness. Marxist feminists tend to look at the culture, reproduction, education. They look at how they kind of like girls and boys, but girls are particularly brainwashed with their role in a nuclear family. And so I'd like you to pause this and just jot down a couple of ideas about how schools encourage cultural reproduction. How do they encourage the gender norms and values? And I mean, in ideas you might be thinking about role models in school, images in textbooks, in like reading books when you're younger. Okay, so pause and have a go from there. So Kelly particularly looked at gender roles within books, and it's this type of stuff, isn't it? It's kind of like Horrid Henry versus like the princess books. Um, and I suppose at the time when we're younger, we don't necessarily notice this, and it's so prevalent that even if your parents try and buy books to like counter these images to make it. I mean, there are like a range of books where like the princesses don't need to be rescued; they can ride their own horse, rescue themselves, and so on. And stories where boys are not necessarily fulfilling this kind of like really aggressive fighting role, where the astronauts are girls and where the people pushing pushchairs are boys. So there is a slight change, but Marxist feminists are really concerned the gender roles we see are very old fashioned, I guess. And Kelly also looked at the hierarchy within schools. I mean, this is, just like Google image, but this is what we often will see. We tend to see men, and often white men, suited and booted, making the economic decisions, and women caring, the cooking, the cleaning, the looking after, while they leave men to make the real important decisions about money. And Marxist feminist, this conflict perpetuates this inequality of power and status and earning potential. Now, liberal feminists are, while they're focusing on how things are getting better, they really focus on the language. I mean, if you think about Oakley and verbal appellation, Oakley's concerned with how gendered language in schools reinforces the gender roles. And I'm going to ask you to pause now and have a look at these couple of little clips. I'll put these on a separate link so they're easier to access. Just have a look and think, how are girls and boys encouraged to fulfil different roles at school? And are they very gender stereotypical? What I'd like you to do now is, from everything you've just discussed, from the clips, and remember we've watched the clip at the beginning and the two you've just seen, I want you to just write out a single sex education as if we're in the 70s. So write down a weekly timetable, even a couple of days. So what would like Monday to Wednesday for a girl look like, Thursday and Friday for a boy, or whatever. Now, I'm sure you know this because I'm sure I've mentioned it because I do go on a lot, but we will look at this in social policy. The national curriculum was invented in 1988 and it came with a piece of law called the Education Reform Act. And it introduced GCSEs and SATs and Ofsted and all sorts. But the national curriculum was invented then. Now, up until that point, it was perfectly legal for girls and boys to learn different stuff. So you could, if you were the head teacher of the school, say, right, my girls are learning cooking, cleaning, and like textiles, note taking, how to be a receptionist, and the boys are learning the harder stuff. And it was legal to do that. It was in 1988 the national curriculum said all children in state schools, so it doesn't affect private, all kids in state schools have to learn the same stuff. And from that moment onwards, girls and boys learnt the same material. And the liberal feminists would say, well, that's great, things are getting better. Of course, going back to that just quickly, I guess the weakness of that, in the concern, I suppose, is that when girls and boys start to choose their subjects, in either year 9 or year 10, there still is a real gender divide. So some schools are doing like a BTEC equivalent in like fitness, health and fitness, healthy living, weight management, and so on, and a PE GCSE. And it's almost like we've got the girls and the boys option. Things like child development, textiles, which often schools market it as calling it the GCSE fashion, for example, tend to marketing it really to girls, whereas things like the computer, I don't know, computer technology, whatever it's called at your school, and even like the STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and maths subjects tend to be channeled towards boys. Now, remember, we do look at gender as a separate issue. This is just about feminist theory. Radical feminists are much more focused on schools as being areas of conflict. Now, it's not just about class, as someone like Willis would say, or Hargreaves, or from the Marxism lesson. The conflict is about gender. Boys call the shots, boys get in the way, boys dominate in the science lab, boys have the social privilege and power to judge girls on their appearance. And us as radical feminists like Miriam David would say, girls don't do it back. So this book here is really important, A Feminist Manifesto for Education. And Miriam David said that women are proportionally more likely to attend new post-1992 universities than more prestigious institutions. All that means is, I suppose, universities are, we've got Oxford, Cambridge and the Russell Group, is almost like the reputation of them and how old the university is. As how high up it is, how difficult it is to get into. And Miriam David is arguing that boys are more likely to be brought up with, both at home and in school, yeah, with a kind of like the false confidence to think they're better than they are. And girls are brought up with being a bit meek and mild and not having that self-confidence, and therefore apply to less prestigious universities, ironically considering that girls get better results than boys. So radical feminists, patriarchy is almost like the bread and butter of the system. And this is Dale Spender. This is a more recent photo. She believes that teachers actually give boys and girls different types of attention. Girls are praised for appearance, good behaviour, neat work, being neatly highlighted, and it kind of leads girls to believe that they have to be perfect physically and in presentation, whereas boys tend to be rewarded for things that are more practical, problem solving, and being confident and having that air of authority. Now, you might be sat there thinking this does sound quite old-fashioned, and you can have that. I agree. Remember that lots of the studies we're looking at here tend to be around the 80s, and you might say things have progressed and girls are doing better. But this is the theory lesson. We've got a whole lesson on class, gender, and ethnicity later on. Okay. So radical feminists say girls have a much worse time at school. Now, Mackengale is interesting. Mackengale's a bloke, isn't he? And it's one person, Martin Mackengale. That's his last name. And he talks about the male gaze. And the male gaze is the look, as in the gaze, in which male pupils and this is repulsive, and male teachers look girls up and down, seeing them as sexual objects and making judgments about their appearance. And it's kind of like this repulsive, sleazy picture in the middle here. And Mackengale sees this as a way of surveillance through dominant heterosexual masculinity is reinforced and femininity devalued in a way that, I don't know, like a year 10, year 11 boy might try and use male privilege to talk about a female teacher in a sexualized way, or way that's just like a really inappropriate. So the hidden curriculum, the things that we're really picking up on, is that girls are for looking at and boys are for making decisions. And Mackengale said this is repulsive. Now, this is vile. Have a read of this article, please. It's really important, and I will come back to this when I teach you inequality. This will be something we can use in a couple of essays out of our whole A level. And it's disgusting. A third of girls have been harassed in their school uniform. I mean, so that's children. Children are being sexually harassed when it's quite visible that they are children. I want to read this article, it's not very long, and start to think about these three questions. How can it be used to support Mackengale's ideas about the male gaze? I mean, in some sense, it's kind of obvious, isn't it, that girls are viewed as sexual objects, and that if the school uniform is not a freedom from patriarchy, it always feeds into this patriarchal schoolgirl fantasy, I guess, that girls are still at risk of sexual harassment when they look like children. You can tell I find this quite disgusting, can't you? Number two, how could this link to the hidden curriculum? What we're really picking up that girls are looking at and men are for making decisions. And how would Dal Spender, this radical feminist over here, how would she view the article? What would she say about it? Obviously, she's going to be outraged. So that's what I'd like you to look at for the radical. Now, you did some prep work over half term. Obviously, you did your Marxism and functionalism essay, and then you did some prep work, and you've had a look through these questions. I'm not going to run through like word by word because it is a bit like comprehension. There. You can use the QR code, click on the link, or it's in your booklet. I want to go straight down to number 5. And we want to think about why feminist views are out of date, because some of the views we're looking at are very dated. I mean, Mac and Gales at the 90s. I suppose the biggest weakness of everything we're hearing today is that girls actually leave with better GCSEs. They leave college with higher A levels. They leave university with higher grade degrees. But earn less actually out in society. So why are some of the feminist views out of date? Could it be that girls have had such a boost with the women's movement that they've got clearer role models and therefore this makes girls do better? So I'll let you have a little look through these. So pause this, make sure you've got the clear notes, any questions, go onto Google Hangouts, for example, saying that you can't see, but it's all within the article. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now is to have a summary, and this is it. Feminism is straightforward. We're not looking in this particular lesson about girls and boys and statistics because we're on theory, yeah? So we've done Marxism, functionalism, and now we're doing feminism. What do they think the purpose of education is? So summarise these. Marxist is about capitalism and patriarchy. Liberal, they are concerned about role models, but things are getting better. Radical, sexual harassment, violence, it's still a very unequal place. The hidden curriculum, male gaze, Mackingale. And I've done this too to help you out a little bit and being a bit controlling in fairness, as you know. So I've put some key names on here and I've put in brackets if they come from the prep work rather than what I've just discussed with you now. With Marxist, I always say you can use Benson and Ansley as well, because any Marxist feminist is talking about employment and patriarchy. Now we can kind of like work our way back, I guess, to careers advice. So education really feeds, perpetuates, enables employment to be starkly different. Okay, so hopefully this helps. Pause and make sure you've got all the right notes on there, please. So a couple of things left, it's the evaluation. So again, this is in your booklet. Use your own knowledge and research, fill out the strengths and weaknesses of feminist theory. Okay, so this is what's the strengths of what you've heard about feminism. And I'd expect to see things in here, most likely like this sleazy picture here. Actually, there may be some truth in that. A third of schoolgirls have been sexually harassed. That's a piece of evidence that's been gathered. So there are definitely some strengths to show that what feminists are saying is pretty much on the money. I mean, girls are more likely to do dance and boys are more likely to do PE. Boys are more likely to do STEM subjects at A level and girls are more likely to do hairdressing and beauty. I mean, that's the stats. So there are some strengths to what the feminists are saying. However, what are the weaknesses? And I've kind of picked this image, I guess, to represent hard-working young women, academically able and stuff. I suppose the biggest weakness is that girls are doing much better than boys. You might start to think about them being out of date. Have a look at the stuff about the radical feminists. Do you think that's true? Is it the case that boys have the upper hand? Okay, so this is what you think. Okay. You could also argue a big weakness of feminist thought is that actually it works. So I would be having functionalism. One of the weaknesses of feminism is that it's very critical about traditional gender roles, however, they're the most effective for preventing anomie. Marxism. A weakness of feminist thought is that it ignores social class. Working class boys probably have a worse time at school than middle class girls. Okay? And you got the stats. Actually, girls do better now. I have actually told you the answers to this, but you know I'm quite controlling. I just want you to get the right stuff down. But do pause and think and add to it. There's stacks of stuff to put in. Now, to conclude this little lesson about feminism, which I do think is really straightforward, I would like you, please, to write this 15 marker. Okay, just because you've done functionalism, you've done Marxism, we'll just well do this properly, do feminism as well. You've done the big essay comparing them. You're going to come back to college and be incredibly well prepared for the education. So it's one sentence, isn't it? Like your introduction. Feminist is a conflict theory which discusses education and wider society as being divided by patriarchy. This means male dominance. Okay, 3 Desras, 3 paragraphs. Now, the big thing which was an issue for some of you for the functionalism was needing 2 pieces of evidence. So I think we've ironed that out a little bit now. But each Desra needs 2 pieces of evidence, and within the theory essay, like this one, it's going to be 2 names. Okay, so what I would do is I'd probably divide up my 3 paragraphs by radical, liberal, and Marxist, because it's going to be quite easy, isn't it? And if you do that, you can sit with this out. You've got 2 names per thing. Okay. You could nip one of these out. You could scrap one of these and use the hidden curriculum instead. You've got 4 things you could talk about there, haven't you? But you just need 3. And you're talking about what do feminists say about education. Can you use stats and stuff? Absolutely. So I'm more than happy for you to talk about 1/3 of schoolgirls being sexually harassed. You can use the examples of things like representation within reading books, but I just want 2 names, because when you're being marked for selecting the correct information, it's the key names that I want in your long-term memory, and it's just visualise me marking them ticking. If you have 2 names per paragraph, like this, and you really clearly link back to the question, you're going to be getting 13, 14, 15 out of 15 in A, basically. Okay. If you put 1 piece of information in each, you're not going to get an A or a B. It's physically impossible on the mark scheme. So 2 names or 2 pieces of evidence per thing. Okay. I'd say just take 20 minutes. Don't overthink it. Do the lesson, listen to this video, do the booklet, have the answers out, and then once you feel really prepared, pop your stuff away. Bit of paper if you want to handwrite it. If you do, try and make it really clear, because it's really hard to mark when you take a photograph. In an ideal world, you just type this. Okay. Introduction, sentence, and then 3 clear Desras. Please put 2 names in each paragraph and you will do fine. If you have extra time, obviously have extra time. If you take rest breaks, basically try and replicate what you do in the exam. Okay, but don't spend ages on it, please. Okay, it should be 1 sentence for an intro, 3 paragraphs, 2 names in each, and you're done. Okay. If you finish early, please revise postmodernism. That's what the second lesson is. If you found this stuff really interesting, I've got some revision notes here. It's quite a lot. It's a PDF, so it's quite a lengthy bit of feminist revision, and it's quite challenging. If you are thinking, right, I want to be getting A's, A stars, I'm enjoying this stuff, and it's helping you to keep going, then use the PDF and do that little bit extra. If it's not, and you're feeling a bit overwhelmed with everything that's going on, it's a really difficult time, please do the 15 marker, go on Hangout and ask for any help. Okay, all day long, me and Mel would help you with this stuff. Okay, so that's it then. So you've got your feminism and education slides, you've got your booklet, which is really straightforward. Okay, it pretty much is matter of fact, and I'd really want this. So all you need to upload is 1 doc with your 15 marker. Okay, right. Any questions, come on to Hangout, and if not, we can look at the postmodernism later.